Count 1, culpable homicide. The sentence imposed is the maximum imprisonment of 5 years imposed in terms of Section 276(1)(I) of the Criminal Procedure Act, number 51 of 1977.
After the sentencing, Pistorius was put into a police van and taken to Mampuru prison, where he is currently serving what is likely to be less than a year behind bars. I can almost remember that visual so clearly as he got into the back of that van. One of the questions where sentencing arguments that came up during sentencing was whether or not Oscar Pistorius would be eligible to actually serve time in jail. And Karen, was he ready?
I think he was. I think his lawyers had told him from the beginning of this case that they believed he would be convicted of culpable homicide and that he would have to serve jail time. And I think the fact that he went to prison willingly and did not attempt to put up any kind of fight or appeal may be a very positive thing and a wise choice for him in light of the fact that this is now coming before the appeal court.
The immediate sense I got from Oscar Pistorius when that sentence was handed down was of relief. I actually felt that he was thinking, you know what, I'm going to go and do this. Thank heavens it's all over. I'm
going to be out of the public eye.
And they can stop. They can leave me alone now. Yeah. The Steenkamp family, the first time June Steenkamp, her face fell open. She became open. She also had this sense of relief to her.
I think for me the biggest thing was the lack, if I can put it this way, of emotion from Oscar. For the entire trial, this man has been weeping, vomiting, sobbing, you know. We've really seen him at his worst. And right at that moment, when he's about to go to jail, he pulled himself together and he went.
Was surprising at the end that from the Steenkamp family, once the sentence was handed down, and of course we now have the state appealing that sentence or wanting to appeal that sentence, that they said, we're satisfied, we just want to move on with their lives.
It broke my heart because I remember seeing this footage of eNCA and she said to Barry, is it time to go home? And he's like, I think it's time to go home. And she said to him, do you have a sense of closure? And he's like, we hope so. And there was such a sadness, like a resignation. But I think at that point, people just want to go on and continue with their lives. And I remember Arnold Pistorius saying on the day that Oscar was convicted of culpable homicide, it was a quote that I think will define this case for me. He said, there are no winners. There are no winners.
Of course, it didn't end there. After the break, the state launches a bid to appeal the verdict and sentence. It's clear the Oscar Pistorius murder trial gripped South Africa like no other trial has done before. The dramatic fall from grace of the Paralympian and the legal issues around his case had us all talking. And even with Pistorius now behind bars, it's not over. National Director of Public Prosecutions, Mxolisi Ncasana, spoke to eNCA about the NPA's decision to appeal.
This is not a personal decision against the judge or against the defense or anyone or against Pistorius. It's just a question of principle, because we have these mechanisms that if sometimes not only when you are not happy, but if you are not sure about really what has happened, you then take the matter to the next level.
And then on the 12th of December, Judge Masipa granted the state leave to appeal Oscar Pistorius' conviction, but she dismissed its leave to appeal sentencing.
In respect of the application in terms of Section 319, I am satisfied that the points raised by the applicant in respect of Count 1 are indeed questions of law. Whether the principles of dolus eventualis were correctly applied to the accepted facts and the conduct of the accused, including error in objecto whether the court correctly conceived and applied the legal principles pertaining to circumstantial evidence and or pertaining to multiple defenses by an accused.
The one thing that's apparent now is that this case is far from over. This closure that the family may have wanted and wanting to move on, that's not about to happen, because 2015 it goes to the Supreme Court of Appeal. What are we expecting?
Well, I think the NPA is going to try and get this case expedited, because if they don't, we face the very unfortunate reality of Oscar Pistorius potentially being out of prison and under correctional supervision when this matter comes before the Supreme Court of Appeal. And in the event of the Supreme Court of Appeal overturning his culpable homicide conviction and replacing it for one of murder under the principle of dolus eventualis, and substituting his sentence, he may well have to go back to prison. And I think everyone involved in this, including the NPA, would want to try and expedite this case so that everyone involved could have that much longed for closure.
And you bring out that word that had most South Africans feeling like they were legal experts: dolus eventualis, dolus directus. Annika?
Yeah, I think, you know, dolus eventualis became part of South Africans, the sort of the national lexicon. I think the first thing the state's got to do is get its house in order, and that is getting transcripts of the entire court record to the Supreme Court of Appeal, because they've got to read that entire court record, every single thing that was said in court.
It's the first time in the country that a case, an entire trial rather, was broadcast live. Very briefly, good or bad idea?
Well, Judge Masipa found that ultimately she viewed it as a potentially bad idea. She said it was clear that the witnesses in this case, to some degree or another, had tailored their testimony, had listened to the evidence of other witnesses, and that this was possibly not a great idea. You know, this was a very tragic case. It involved the destruction, arguably, of 2 lives, the obvious death of Reeva Steenkamp in terrible circumstances, and the obvious death on many levels of Oscar Pistorius, the Paralympic hero. That man is no longer with us. And I think that there will be uncomfortable ethical questions and legal questions about whether broadcasting that case in all its meltdown glory was the right thing to do.
I think it was important for South Africans to understand how our judiciary works, like the simple nuts and bolts of the daily and the day-to-day court processes. And I think from that perspective, the nation has gained a lot from watching the Oscar Pistorius trial. But I think more importantly, whatever you might want to say about Oscar Pistorius, the NPA, the one thing that we can say about our judiciary, it is independent. It is not swayed by public opinion.
Annika, Judge Masipa was aware from the beginning that she was going to be, you know, under immense scrutiny. How do you think she held up?
I was saying to my colleagues earlier, I just found her to be the most perfect symbol of Lady Justice. Yeah. I thought she ran a very, very, very good courtroom.
And it shows to her credit that she decided to grant the state leave to appeal on this.
As journalists covering this case, what have you learned from it? What do you take away?
Mostly, I think, for me, was the sense of pride, I think, in our judiciary. Because it works.
Many would say that this is not the experience of many ordinary South Africans. So is it really fair to say that, you know, this is...
That's how a trial should be run. I also think, thank heavens, we don't have a jury system. Thank goodness we had this very decent, impartial person adjudicating here.
My sadness in all of this is that through the evidence of Kim Martin during sentencing, we did get a sense of this woman's magic, of her enthusiasm and her love and her immensity. But at the end of all of this, she is gone. Yeah. And I just think that, you know, apart from all the CSI-like details and the interest and the intrigue and the vomiting and the tears, sometimes I feel like all of us may have forgotten that on some level. I mean, Reeva Steenkamp is gone. And I feel like I remember her teacher saying that it was a loss to the country because she was the kind of young South African that we needed, and she's not with us anymore.
What a year it has been. Thank you so much to all of you for sharing your insights into the Oscar Pistorius murder trial. Take care and goodbye.